Here is the rule book, tea stained by myself, as you can see. It's 32 pages. You've got just a page or so of designer's notes at the end. You've got all these sections in it, including all of these are optional rules, but well, I said it's all nicely well laid out and so forth. There are silly things like optional rules, but then that includes the victory conditions and scenarios and peace negotiations. Those are not optional. Some of these are optional, so some of the headings are not perfect in these. But I tend to, as you probably noticed, I tend to sort of highlight the positive about a game, because all games have negatives and none of them are perfect. I prefer to sort of speak about what's good about it, and I'll mention the negative if it's particularly noteworthy. So you have the introduction, playing pieces, sequence of play, description, and so it goes all the way through zones of control, stacking, entrenchment, combat, etc. Off map, blah blah blah, air power, blah blah blah. So you can see that's 31 pages of rules, but like I said, and as you can probably see, okay, I highlighted the titles to make them stand out more. It's sectioned according to case numbers, and which makes it laid out very nicely. You can see, I like it where they have short paragraphs. Okay, so that's what you need to know. That's what you need to know. This one's just one sentence, and it's broken out. It's bullet pointed, as it were. So it clears. It makes it clear, and it's nice to have these to give you a visual indicator as you're looking through the map book. What's what. So at this point in this video, I'd just like to just verbally go through the sequence of play, and I'll actually do it with you in another video. So you start with the strategy card phase. So this is when each player selects strategy cards secretly, up to 3 campaign cards based on morale. So if there's 3 states of morale. If you have medium morale, you can only get 2, and low morale only 1. So you can see you can deteriorate quite quickly, but you won't necessarily want to play through one campaign card for each front, because as you saw, some of them don't come back, and some of them they have risks. So you have to be careful how you do it. Then you have so that's they're secretly chosen, and then you get 1 contingency or 1 weapons and tactics card. Then you go to the grand diplomacy phase. So here you check your morale, and then you see if you're going to both play peace negotiations, which would end the game. If you don't, you might have a contingency card which has grand diplomacy in it, and then you would play that. And here is what those types of cards might be. So one might be the US entry and diplomacy card, and it's played against a neutral country. So you would roll on this table. On a 1 to 3, no effect. On a 4, non-belligerent alliance. On a 5 to 7, on a d6, an alliance. And then you have modifiers. So if your morale is high, you get +1, low -1. Then allies target Bulgaria, they get a -2. Central powers target Bulgaria, they get a +1. Also United States, Romania, if there's unrestricted submarine warfare. So you can see you have to look carefully at these tables and say, right, central power targeting Romania, there's probably going to be no effect. But if I'm targeting Romania or Bulgaria, I get a bonus. So, and if my morale is high, I get a bonus. So there's a better chance of an alliance, or at least a non-belligerent alliance. You also have the Americas situation. I'm sorry, I could get those cards for you, I suppose, but I'll just quickly go through this. So you roll again. You have to check the modifiers, and you might get Mexican expedition, propaganda, a Zimmerman note, or a crusade for democracy. Then there's also Kitchener table, where the empire might rally, there might be industrial mobilization, new armies. So these all have effects. So for example, if the new armies, the British would roll 1 die and receive that number of divisional equivalents of reserve corps. Now each corps is normally about 2 divisional equivalents. Some go up to 4, some are even some 3, some 4. For the previous table, that was the Kitchener one. Mexican expedition, subtract -2 from any Allied diplomacy attempt against the United States the following turn. You just have to make a note of that. So for example, Zimmerman note, 2 to any Allied diplomacy attempts against. So again, you have to, that card would entail a risk, but you play it when the die roll modifiers are in your favour. Now the Allied minor powers table, Allied colonial campaign table. The Allied minor powers, that's for alliances. The colonial campaign, you could gain a colony on the world box. There's the ultimatum table. I mentioned that from the ultimatum card. So here, like I said, depending on modifiers like how many units you have on the board and which unit it is, which nation is being targeted, you get various modifiers like -3 for Switzerland or Belgium, which means there's probably going to be a counter declaration the other side. It would go to the other side, or capitulation or alliance. So that the target country might surrender or actually become an ally. Peace negotiations table, right. So if those cards, both players play those cards, you actually roll. So on a 0, there's a revolutionary action. On a 1 to 4, fighting continues. 5, fraternization. 6 or 7, there's the armistice. So again, like in 1918, you get -2, so it's more likely to be revolution and reaction. The game ends and both players lose as Europe descends into chaos. Or in 1914, +2, there's more likely to be fraternization. No, neither side may play any campaign cards in the ensuing turn, or armistice. The game ends and both players immediately check for their victory conditions. Then there's a colonial campaign table too. So that is what you are checking for card play, contingency card play in the grand diplomacy phase. Then we would go to psychological warfare phase. Now you have a certain number of agents. They come in and out as the game goes, or increase, and you allocate them to psychological warfare missions. Then you both reveal them and conduct them. Then we come to the operations phase. So you reveal your campaign card in each theatre if you played one, and then you start each impulse. The first part is the reorganization phase. So that is effectively that because of the stacking in the game, you can only have 3 units, but they can be of different sizes. So if you break a corps down into or if you could have, say, like 2 3-division equivalent corps in the hex, or 3 2-division equivalent corps in the hex. So their strength is all commensurate, it's relative to their size, but so you can move more. You have more potential for maneuver, but you can stack less in a hex with more units. So you reorganize at the beginning. You break them down or build them up, combine them at the beginning. Then there's the movement, and then there's combat phase. That's followed by the Entente, so the Central Powers does that first. That's the first operational impulse. Then you could, if there is any, second, third, and possibly fourth operational impulses. And as I said before, if your campaign card enables you to play extra impulses, that doesn't mean your opponent gets those impulses. All he can do is sit back and defend against your attacks. Then you go to the supply attrition phase. So you roll to determine if out of supply units are eliminated. And then the morale phase. Remove any mutiny or strike markers on capitals. Now, I can't remember what that's to do with, but that tells you something about the game. if an Entente blockade was in effect, you roll for the morale adjustment on the central powers. So when the Entente plays their blockade card, every turn the clock is ticking for the central powers, their morale is going down. So that pushes them to go for objectives, not just to sort of stagnate. And then you make any adjustments to morale for attaining or failing objectives, and for gaining or losing countries or cities, and for losing units. Yeah, so morale goes up and down if you capture a country, and also if you capture certain cities. And it can be between 10 and 5 or 1 and 2, depending on the city and the nation which it belongs to. So capitals, industrial centres from major nations are worth more in raising or lowering morale. Then we go to the mobilization phase. You turn up any weapons and tactics cards and roll for possible success, deducting any industrial point expense. And then you check, do the commerce raiding. So Central Powers Commerce Raiders, that's their answer to the blockade. Then merchant shipping, economic warfare. The intended player rolls on the merchant shipping outcome table to determine how the strained intended shipping has affected British morale and industrial capacity. Industrial capacity determination. So now that chart which I had over there with all the industrial cities, you now add up what they are providing. You times it by a multiple which changes depending on the year and season, and also Russia. For example, Russia, certain times they get a bigger production multiple for about 1 year, 1916, but generally they get a smaller multiple than the other nations. So that multiplier against your industrial cities gives you mobilization points. Then you allocate those points to various uses. For example, some of them might be used for weapons and tactics cards. Industrial and petroleum points are expended to mobilize new units. Now I should show you that chart at this point. So here's the mobilization costs chart. So for example, a headquarters costs 20 industrial points, takes 2 quarters to be completed, and costs 0 petroleum points. You can see armoured car brigades, tank brigades and tank corps require petroleum points, as do the air and some of the naval units. So those petroleum centres are all important for those. You can also at this point buy motorization markers, so you can motorize some units, poison gas attacks, political warfare agents. Now those they don't actually cost industrial points, they cost morale points, and I think it's 1 each. So at the cost of 1 morale point, you can use your political warfare agents. Guerrillas come in, they don't cost. And then your cities and rail lines can become devastated, and you can repair those at this point. So that's the mobilization, and then you simultaneously bring on any reinforcements that are due, either timed reinforcements or from that mobilization that you have organized. So most of the reinforcements are down to you. It's just each scenario has a few initial reinforcements that effectively have already been paid for and mobilized. And then reorganization again. So if you had any units that were left entrenched and you want them to be mobile at the beginning of your turn, you could, for example, if you're in Entente, you want to entrench them at the beginning of the Central Powers turn, next turn, then you would do so now. Discard and political events phase. So you discard your strategy cards played this turn. If so, some might remain in play. Some out of the game forever. Some can come back at your choice. And then you can consult the political events table. So that happens every turn. And where is it? We got here supply attrition, merchant shipping, commerce raiding tables. Then we got naval combat bombardment tables, air superiority, air ground attack tables, And here, there's a list of all the air unit operations, from air transfer, reconnaissance, ground support. And at doctrine level of 1, you can only do air transfer and reconnaissance. So you can transfer your air units around and perform reconnaissance. If you've raised your doctrine level with a weapons and tactics card successfully rolled for and paid for, then you can do offensive ground support. Level 3, you've got air superiority, interdiction, interception. Level 4, you get strategic bombing, etc., all the way up to level 5 with air naval attacks, paradrops, poison gas attacks. So you can see the potential there with the air component. Okay, here's the psychological warfare chart. So that was agents attacking each other. I'll come to that in a minute. What was I looking for? Political events table here. So every turn you roll on this table. This is very important. Can't see that so well. Sorry about that. Let me try and put a bit more light on the situation. Okay, but essentially what it is you roll the d6. On a 0 there's a revolution. On 7 there's crusade. And then in between you have march on or various friction 1 or friction 2. Now if your morale is high, you roll +1. So each side rolls this. So for example, one side might get a revolution, the other side might get a crusade. Or you might both fall into revolution. Morale is low, there's a -1. So on the roll of 1, it's march on. But if you have low morale and you roll a 1, that brings you down to 0. There's going to be revolution. In 1917 to 1919, you have -1, and 1914 to 1915 +1. So again, you're more likely to get crusade. What is crusade? Well, again, you roll on the table, and essentially your results can be things like stab in the back, oops, backfired, reduce your morale by 5 points, or you get war fever. You can pick a contingency card at random, and then you have to play it. So, you know, your politicians or whatever say, do this. You don't have a chance. National rally, increase morale by 10 points. Elan, workers mobilise, volunteers to the front. So that just gives you an idea of the flavour of these political events every turn. The revolution table, it has modifiers, so it depends on which country it is. So, for example, Britain and the United States get +2. Sorry about the glare. Which essentially means they're more likely to suppress the revolution, or it will result in a national rally or just a strike. Whereas Russia has a -2, or the capital of a country, if it's enemy occupied, is a -1. And so that you could get to red terror. Red terror means that the country surrenders, it's out of the war. You put a revolution marker on the capital, which remains in place for the rest of the game, and then you get Bolshevik and nationalist units. So that's some red and I think grey units that will come on. So obviously historically this happens to the Russian nation, but it could happen to one of the other powers in this game. There might just be a mutiny, so your capital is sort of so you lose some of your units as the army units in mutinies, or you get strikes. We saw that these markers would be removed, so it only lasts a turn. That means that units that are being mobilised are pushed back on the production track. So the political events, or you could just get friction, and that's more or less just random events, such as there's 2 types of friction, so some are worse than others. 2 different tables for it. Things like ammunition shortages, anti-war demonstrations, colonial uprising, epidemic, general strike, nationalist uprising, war under the sea, etc. Gosh, there's a lot. And you can see that it brought those tables and so forth bring a lot into the game in the same way that card play does, that doesn't require lots of extra rules. It's just simple little tweaks that you come to as and when you need to. So after that, the political events phase, you move the game marker to the next box in the track and repeat the sequence of play. So I hope that was nice, little overview. And again, apart from the look at the physical components, that gives you an idea of the some of the scope of sort of political and meta actions to affect the operational strategic considerations of the army commanders or whoever you are representing on each side.